The music was just beginning. I stood in the small room beside the main church hall, holding my bouquet. My uniform felt right, as it always did. The dark blue jacket, the trousers pressed with a sharp crease, and the polished medals on my chest. My soon-to-be husband, Ben, was waiting at the altar, and I could hear the quiet murmur of our guests as they rose to their feet. Just then, my phone vibrated. I looked down at the screen one last time before I planned to turn it off. It was a text from my father. "I won't be there. You are an embarrassment to this family." I read the message twice, then a third time, as if the words might change. They didn't. It wasn't a sharp, sudden pain. It was more like a dull, heavy feeling settling in my chest. I just stood there for a moment in the quiet room. I knew I shouldn't have been surprised. He hadn't sent back the RSVP. He hadn't called. Even so, I think a small, foolish part of me had held out hope that he would just show up. I thought that maybe seeing me, ready to marry a good man who respected my life and my career, might finally change his mind. My hands felt a little unsteady, which was strange. I've faced much more dangerous situations, but this was a different kind of wound. Ben, of course, noticed my expression immediately. He always does. He had been straightening his tie in the mirror on the far wall, but he stopped and walked over to me. I didn't have to explain. I just handed him the phone. I watched his face as he read the text. His jaw tightened for just a second, but then his expression softened. He handed the phone back to me, leaned in to kiss my forehead, and said something very simple. "Give me 2 hours." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Ben just gave me that quiet, patient smile he gets when he's already 3 steps ahead of everyone else. It was the same smile that drew me to him when we first met. He pulled out his own phone, made a very quick call, and spoke in a low, calm voice. I couldn't hear what he said, but it was brief. He slipped his phone back into his jacket pocket, took my hand, and said gently, "Let's not give him another minute of this day. This is all yours." I took a deep breath, swallowed hard, and nodded. Just then, the attendant opened the chapel doors. The moment I stepped into the sanctuary, the room became very quiet. It wasn't because of what I was wearing exactly. Everyone there knew what I did for a living. It was more about how I stood. I had decided weeks ago that I wouldn't wear a white dress. I was going to wear my uniform, my Army service uniform with the dark blue coat, the crisp trousers, the 4 ribbons on my chest, my unit insignia, and the silver maple leaves on my shoulders that marked my rank as a lieutenant colonel. It wasn't a political statement. It was just personal. I wore it because I had earned it. And Ben loved me for it. In fact, he was the one who suggested it. "You fought too hard for that," he'd said. "You shouldn't hide who you are." My father, on the other hand, had once called it a costume for people who don't know how to be women. That comment had never fully healed, but today I didn't think about it. I walked toward the man who truly saw me, and I married him in front of all the people who mattered. The ceremony was simple and meaningful. I didn't cry, not until we were exchanging vows, and Ben reached up to touch the back of my hand, his thumb brushing over a small scar near my knuckle. It was like he knew, without words, every part of the journey that had brought me to that altar. When we kissed, I felt, for the first time in a long time, completely whole. It wasn't until the reception that my phone found its way back to me. We were halfway through our first dance, a soft song playing in the background, when my maid of honor, Kate, hurried up to us, her eyes wide. "Sarah," she said, "your phone has been ringing off the hook." I took it from her and felt my breath catch. 58 missed calls, all from one number, Dad. I showed the screen to Ben. He just raised an eyebrow and smiled that same smile from before. 2 hours, he whispered. And just like that, I understood that something had changed. My father's name carries a lot of weight in our hometown. Judge Arthur Hayes, retired circuit court, third-generation attorney. He was an expert in constitutional law and the very proud head of a family he liked to describe as having a legacy of logic and discipline. He raised me like he was preparing a case with strict rules and no room for error. My childhood felt like one long debate prep session. He would quiz me at dinner on case law I didn't care about. Every success was graded, and every mistake was treated like a failed cross-examination. But I was also my mother's daughter. She was a quiet, steady presence in our house, an elementary school teacher with a soft voice. When she passed away from cancer during my sophomore year of high school, something in our house broke. My father wanted me to go to Yale. Instead, I enlisted. It was about a month after 9/11. I walked into the Army recruiter's office the day after I turned 18 and signed the papers. When I told my father, he was silent for a full 5 minutes. Then he said flatly, "You're throwing away your future. This is what people do when they have no other options." I wanted to yell that it was my option, my choice, but I didn't. I just left the house with my duffel bag and didn't look back for 2 years. Basic training was a shock, but it also felt like freedom. I did well in the structured environment, the clarity of the rules. Unlike in my father's house, the rules in the Army weren't personal weapons. They were for survival. I advanced quickly. I went on deployments, received commendations, and went through leadership training. I discovered I had a good mind for logistics and could keep my head in chaos. While my father was arguing in courtrooms, I was coordinating convoy routes through hostile territory. We barely spoke for more than 10 years. When I came back from my first deployment in Afghanistan, I sent him a photo of me receiving a Bronze Star. He never replied. The next time I saw him was at my cousin's wedding. I was in uniform because I had come straight from the base. When I walked into the church, my father was talking to a friend. He saw me, visibly stiffened, and then turned away. He avoided me for the entire reception. I remember just standing there, watching him laugh with my cousin's new in-laws, and thinking that he could accept total strangers but not his own daughter. Still, a part of me always hoped. I hoped that when he saw my name in print, saw that I wasn't just some kid in fatigues, but a respected, decorated officer, he might feel something other than shame. When I met Ben, that hope came back. Ben wasn't in the military. He was an architect, practical, thoughtful, and analytical. He was one of those quiet people who commanded a room without ever raising his voice. He met my father exactly once, about 6 months into our relationship. I had arranged a very tense lunch back home. Ben wore a blazer, I wore a polite smile. My father barely made eye contact with either of us. When we told him we were getting married, he just muttered, "Don't expect me to sit in the front row for a camouflage ceremony." It wasn't camouflage. It was my Class A uniform, the kind you wear for the most important events. But to him, anything other than a white dress was a public humiliation. He made it clear that if I insisted on parading around like a soldier, he would boycott the event. And he did. Which brings me back to the text message. "You're an embarrassment to this family." It wasn't a shock, but it still hurt. Not because I needed his approval anymore, but because I still wanted to believe he was capable of changing. But now, with those 58 missed calls lighting up my phone during my wedding reception, I knew something had shifted. Something had forced his hand. And I had no idea what Ben had said or done to make it happen. After the reception, I slipped into the bridal suite while guests were getting cake. The uniform that usually felt like a part of me now felt heavy. I sat on the bench, my bouquet next to me, and looked at the call log. The voicemails had gotten progressively more desperate. The first one was curt. "Sarah, call me when you get this." The next, "I think I overreacted. We should talk." And the last one I listened to was strained. "Sarah, please. Something's happened I didn't know. Just call me." Ben knocked before he came in. He stood in the doorway, his tie loose and his jacket unbuttoned, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Any word from the press?" he asked casually. I blinked. "The press?" He sat down next to me. "You might want to check a few news sites." I opened my phone's browser, my hands a little shaky, and typed in my own name. And there it was. It was the front page story on the Washington Chronicle's website. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes, the hero no one saw coming. It was a full feature with a photo of me saluting. It was a deep dive into my 16 years of service. It mentioned the Bronze Star. It detailed the operation in Kandahar, where I had coordinated the safe rescue of 14 personnel who were under enemy fire. It even mentioned my quiet nomination for the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I stared at the screen, my throat tight. "I thought this article wasn't supposed to be published until next month," I whispered. Ben nodded. "It wasn't. But after I saw the text your father sent, I called my old college roommate, Leo Kent. He's an editor at the Chronicle. I told him it was time." I looked at my new husband. "You leaked it." "I expedited the truth," he replied. Your father wanted to make this day about disgrace. I figured the world should know who you really are. I didn't say anything, just leaned against him, my forehead on his shoulder. Ben added, I also may have copied a few friends at the Atlantic and in the governor's office. I let out a soft, slightly broken laugh. You declared a media war on my wedding day. He kissed my temple. No, I just leveled the battlefield. By the next morning, the story had gone viral. Dozens of other outlets had picked it up. Former commanders and soldiers I had served with were tweeting their support. A retired general wrote a short post, one of the finest officers I ever had the privilege to serve beside. The calls kept coming. By noon, my father's name lit up my screen again. This time I answered. Sarah. He exhaled my name. His voice was strained. I had no idea. The article, I saw it, I said flatly. There was a long pause. What I said, what I texted, it was out of line. I didn't understand what you'd become. No, I said softly. You just didn't want to. He was quiet for a long time. I've made a mistake, he finally admitted. Can I see you? I hesitated, then gave him the name of the cafe down the block from our hotel at Zte. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Thank you, he breathed. I hung up and told Ben. He just nodded. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked. I'm not sure of anything, I replied. But I'm tired of carrying this silence. The cafe was quiet, with sun streaming in the windows. I arrived first, ordered a tea, and sat by the window. When my father walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. Not because his appearance had changed, he was still tall, still rigid, still wearing a perfectly pressed charcoal gray suit, but because the look in his eyes was different. The fire was gone, there was no judgment. In its place was something I had never seen in him: hesitation. He sat down and cleared his throat. Sarah, I raised a hand. Before you say anything, I said calmly, I want you to understand something. What you said yesterday and what you've been saying for years has hurt me. Not because I ever needed your permission to live my life, but because I wanted your respect. And every time I reached for it, you pulled away. He bowed his head. You didn't just miss a wedding, I continued. I said, you missed a lifetime of me becoming who I am. His hands clenched on the table. I thought I was protecting you. I thought the military would break you. It didn't, I said. It made me. He looked up at me and his voice was thick. I see that now. There was no big apology after that, not yet. But when he asked if he could come to the post-reception brunch the next day just to sit in the back, I said yes. I did it for me, not for him. I was done making myself smaller to fit his expectations. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. My father had spent 40 years building a career in a courtroom, a place where every fact is weighed and every truth is tested. He lived by the rule of law, and yet, when it came to his own daughter, he had delivered a guilty verdict long ago without any evidence, simply because I wasn't the person he had imagined. He thought he was raising a lawyer. I became a soldier instead. In his mind, that was failure. But the world had changed. And now, for the first time, it wasn't just me saying it. The article that Ben had pushed forward had started a ripple effect. Within 48 hours, 3 different media outlets requested interviews, veterans groups reached out, I was invited to speak at an upcoming leadership summit. Others responded too. My former CO, General Eva Moss, who is now retired, posted a personal essay online. In it, she described a time in Kandahar when our communications went down during a raid. She wrote about how I had manually recalculated our extraction coordinates while under indirect fire, leading the team out safely. She ended the essay with a sentence that made me stop and breathe. She didn't just serve with honor, she led with grace. If I had a daughter, I would want her to be Sarah Hayes. The comments under her post exploded, and then came the calls from D.C. First from a staffer, then from a senator. The Medal of Freedom nomination wasn't just symbolic anymore, it had real support. Meanwhile, Back in my father's world, things were getting complicated. A local paper ran a headline: Veteran hero snubbed by prominent retired judge on wedding day. The article didn't use his name, but in our small town, everyone knew exactly who it was. Ben's quiet efforts had made sure of that. I hadn't asked for revenge, but I couldn't deny the feeling of balance it brought. I just watched as the man who had dismissed my life's work was suddenly forced to see it. That Sunday, at the brunch with our close friends and family, my father arrived. He came alone. He wore a simple navy suit and handed a small gift box to Ben, not to me, a gesture that showed he understood he wasn't welcome in the inner circle just yet. He stayed at the back, spoke very little, and drank his coffee. When I glanced his way during a toast, our eyes met. He just nodded once. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't a reunion, but it was something. Later that week, my phone rang. It was General Moss. "Lieutenant Colonel," she said, "you're being considered for a position on the Joint Veterans Reform Task Force. We need strategic minds with field experience. Interested?" I was stunned. "Yes, ma'am," I said without hesitation. "Good," she said. "Get ready." That evening, I sat with Ben on our back porch. "Did you ever think it would come to this?" I asked. He gave me a small smile. "Honestly, I didn't expect a text from your dad to trigger a national nomination. But I did know one thing." "What's that?" He turned to me, his expression serious. "You've spent your entire life proving your worth to someone who was never ready to see it. Now the whole world sees it, and he has no choice but to open his eyes." I leaned into him. "He's trying," I said quietly. "Let him," Ben replied. "But don't carry his shame anymore. It's not yours." I didn't answer right away. I just let the truth of that wash over me. He was right. He stood just outside the ballroom, his suit pressed, but his shoulders were slumped. There was a hesitation in the way his hands fidgeted. For a man who had commanded courtrooms, he looked small. I saw him through the glass doors before he saw me. Guests were laughing and dancing inside. This was supposed to be our night, but I walked toward him anyway. Ben met me halfway. "He's been standing out there for 15 minutes, he said gently. I nodded. "Did he ask for me?" "No, he just said he didn't want to interrupt unless you allowed it." That, more than anything, caught me off guard. I stepped through the doors into the cool evening air. He looked up when I approached. "Sarah," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "You look—" "Don't," I said, stopping him. "Don't start with pleasantries. Not today." He nodded. "Okay." A long, awkward pause stretched between us. He cleared his throat. "I was wrong." He repeated it, slower this time. "I was wrong. About all of it, the military, you, that uniform. I thought I was protecting you from something harsh. It turns out you were running toward it with more honor than I've ever shown." I watched him. "And what made you decide that? The articles?" His shoulders slumped. "Yes and no. I think I always knew. I just didn't know how to face it." "You didn't have to know everything," I said. "You just had to show up." He looked at me and I saw the regret. "I read everything," he said. "Your records, the citations, the letters from your commanding officers. I saw the interviews. I saw you." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You saw the version of me the public loves. But I'm still the same woman who came home and stood by the fridge waiting for you to say something. The same woman who mailed you promotion announcements and invitations. You threw every one of them away." He looked away, his jaw clenched. "So why now?" I asked. Why today?" He took a slow breath. "Because today, for the first time, I realized the loss was mine." I didn't answer. Inside, I heard the band start a new song. "I'm not here to absolve you," I said. "And I'm not going to plan my life around your forgiveness. If you want to be part of my life now, it will be on my terms. Respect first. And you don't get to skip that." Another pause. Then very quietly, "I'm sorry." I exhaled. It didn't fix everything, but it mattered. I turned toward the reception hall. "Can I?" he asked, gesturing toward the door. "De plus Satan?" "No," I said gently. Not tonight. Tonight is mine. But there might be a tomorrow. I'm not slamming the door." He accepted that. "Thank you," he said. I walked away. Back inside, Ben was waiting with 2 glasses of champagne. I stepped into his arms. "How do you feel?" he asked. I considered it, like I'm done dragging dead weight. We clinked glasses, and we danced. I didn't hear from my father for several weeks, but the silence felt different. It wasn't the old, heavy, punishing silence. This was lighter, as if he knew the ball was in my court. Meanwhile, life moved quickly. I officially transitioned out of active duty and accepted the federal appointment as an advisor for military reintegration programs. The work was complex. The systems were messy. But I was good at building bridges. I found inconsistencies in how veterans were accessing benefits. So I built a new streamlined framework, a digital portal to ensure no one's paperwork could just disappear. Within 6 months, delays had dropped by 40%. The work led to the invitation to speak at the Defense Women's Leadership Summit. I stood behind the podium and looked out at the sea of uniforms. "I didn't join the military to make a statement," I said. "I joined because I believed in service, but I learned something bigger. Family isn't defined by who you share a name with. It's defined by who shows up. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And sometimes the hardest oath you take is the one to respect yourself when others won't." I got a standing ovation. A few days later, I received a letter on thick, cream-colored stationery. I recognized the handwriting instantly. "Dear Sarah, I've spent most of my life believing that to lead meant to be right, but watching you taught me something more valuable. True leadership begins where pride ends. I've stepped down from my final board appointments. I've donated to veterans charities, including one in your name. I'm not asking for reconciliation, that is your right, but please know I see you now, fully and with the deepest respect. Dad." Weeks later, I sat with Ben on our back deck. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. It's strange. I used to dream about proving him wrong, forcing an apology, and now I realize it was never about the apology. It was about not needing it anymore. The Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony took place in the East Room of the White House on a crisp autumn afternoon. The room was filled with dignitaries and other recipients, scientists, civil rights leaders, artists. When they called my name, I rose. The president shook my hand, smiled warmly, and said, "The country thanks you, Colonel." As the medal was placed around my neck, I saw him in the back row of the audience. My father. He didn't try to approach. He simply sat there, alone, watching. After the ceremony, I found him waiting in a side hall away from the crowd. "Sarah," he said, "Dad." "I didn't come to make a scene," he said quickly. "I just wanted to witness it, to see you honored." He hesitated. "I know I can't fix what I broke. But seeing you up there today, it broke something in me too, something that needed breaking." I studied him, sigh. "You didn't just miss the wedding," I said. "You missed everything that led to it, the woman I became." His eyes filled. "I know." A pause. "I'm not here to rehash the past," I said, but I do believe people can change." He nodded. "I want to." "Then start by listening." "I will." We walked the hallway in silence side by side. It was enough. Over the next year, the nonprofit I launched expanded. We called it Second Oath, a place for female veterans to find mentorship and recommit to life on their own terms. Ben was there every step. One spring morning, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my father. "I've just completed the first mentorship session at the VA Center. I'm teaching young men how to advocate for themselves in legal settings. It's humbling work. Thank you for showing me how to serve." I stared at the screen for a long time before showing it to Ben. He smiled. "That's a different man than the one who texted you on our wedding day." I nodded. Yes, and so is his daughter. Later that evening, I stepped onto another stage. I looked at the crowd and thought about how easy it is to let anger drive you. Revenge is easy, you just let the fire take over. But redemption is a choice. Sometimes the person you're saving isn't them, it's you. I used to wonder what would have happened if I'd answered that first text with fury. Maybe I would have felt righteous for a while, but it wouldn't have lasted. The truest power isn't in tearing things down, it's in building something stronger in their place.